I'm Lorena, and I'm not quite exactly a filmmaker yet, but I do love watching them. So today we will be looking into Cheryl Dunye's 1996 film, The Watermelon Woman. The story follows Cheryl, a young black lesbian filmmaker who becomes fixated on a black actress from the 30s and 40s who is simply credited in movies as The Watermelon Woman. As she documents her investigation on this mysterious woman, Cheryl also shares snippets of her daily life and chaotic experiences in the lesbian scene of 90s Philadelphia, drawing correlations between herself and the figure she discovers to be Faye Richards, Cheryl's beacon of hope and representation. As her life slowly crumbles apart, at least Cheryl's one small win is unveiling this hidden facet of black queer cinema history, right? Well, not exactly. See, at the very end of the film, while Cheryl narrates the biography of Faye Richards and the credits roll, it is revealed that the actress is a fictional character. And in fact, every character in the film, even Cheryl herself, is not the real deal. Fiction and suspension of disbelief is not a new topic in film, but how exactly does Dunye sell the idea of the watermelon woman's reality? We'll delve into that in this video. Those familiar with Cheryl Dunye, the director, not the character, may be aware of her work's characteristic style of the self-coined term Dunyementary, which allows Dunye to play with narrative and documentary techniques in a mix of film, video, friends, and a lot of heart. In the spirit of a Dunyementary, Dunye doesn't entirely fabricate a lie, but rather bends a truth. We are presented with people who either embody fictionalized versions of themselves or parodies of real people and organizations. There is also the very real and unfortunate erasure of black, female, and or queer people in history and physical archive, which is not exclusive to the film industry. Cheryl, metatextually, says it herself.
I know it has to be about black women because our stories have never been told.
This also takes on a new meaning if we account for the fact that not only is this Dunye's first feature film, but also the first ever film to be by and about a black lesbian. These half-truths, coupled by the presence of a compelling mystery, create a grounded conceptual foundation for the story. In terms of film form, we can identify three different elements used to visually support this foundation. The mise-en-scène, which refers to any element in a scene that is organized to be filmed. The cinematography, which is the window into the world that is constructed to communicate feelings and ideas. And the editing, which is the process of selecting and joining film footage to shape the narrative or to have an emotional or visceral impact in the audience. When considering the mise-en-scène of The Watermelon Woman, we can look into the realism of the settings and costuming, all faithful depictions of the places and ways of life Dunye seeks to represent. We could also talk about the naturalistic features of the acting, Cheryl's transparency about her motivations and processes, the interviews that depict believable attitudes, or even the casual banter between Cheryl and her entourage of sapphic sisters that barely registers as overdramatized, for example. But among these things, prop construction, especially in the form of archival fabrication, might be one of the most significant aspects of the film. In an interview by art historian Julia Bryan Wilson, Dunye explains that while doing her preliminary research, she found the Lesbian Her Story archive and the Library of Congress both house fitting material for the film, but unfortunately, she couldn't afford to loan and use them, choosing instead to create the archive she needed. So Dunye partners with Zoe Leonard, who designs the archive known as the Faye Richards Photo Archive, consisting of 78 gelatin silver prints, 4 chromogenic prints, and a notebook containing 7 pages of typescript. Matt Richardson notes that these photographs and footage were interspersed with several photographs from the time period throughout the film, challenging the division between fact and fiction, past and present. This dedication to self-documentation on Dunye's part once again speaks for the misfortune of limited access to black and queer history, but also to the agency she is reclaiming by choosing what and how to represent this missing history. Then for cinematography, we have to first break down the 3 formats we're shown throughout the film. First, we got the archival material stylized to resemble newsreels or home video from any time between the 30s and beyond. The film's not grained, disjointed nature observed among each moment, and the shots and compositions all create a sense of distance between the subjects and the camera, as well as a temporal one, suiting this concept of found footage that we see throughout the film. The second is the use of digital video footage, which adds to the many elements that are so recognizably from the 90s. This supports Cheryl's status as an amateur filmmaker at the time. In an interview with writer Steven Saito, Dunye retells the decision to shoot Cheryl's video diary parts in digital. She initially thought it would be cheaper, only to later find out the stitching of this footage to the 16mm film stock portions would be so much more complex, as there was no technology available to do such thing. With a lot of neutral shots and documentary-style talking heads, this portion does a great deal in fully showing Cheryl's world and her point of view. When she's not physically at the helm of a camera, focusing on her subjects, she faces it head-on in her monologues. The acknowledgement of the camera creates an intimacy with the audience, heightening our sense of involvement with the filmmaking process. Finally, the 16mm film footage is perhaps the most visually out of place in the creation of this movie's reality. In these segments, different elements of film form are more traditionally arranged. Things like complex lighting or frame composition, strategic blocking, and scenes composed of multiple camera shots. On my first watch, I considered these third-person views as hints that this documentary was not as true as it seemed, because by presenting this situation so clearly, it had to be staged, only to be completely blindsided by the revelation. In that case, it can be considered that these segments not only support narrative and character development in a way that is entertaining, but also help throw off dissent from the truth. Lastly, on the subject of editing, the mix of the three narrative formats helps the audience intertwine Richard's past with Cheryl's present and fully grasp their effects on discoveries and progression, fleshing out their respective realities. It is also the element that best represents the aesthetic sensibilities of the 90s, vibrant colors, unconventional fonts that appear on title cards, and white transitions that are mostly used during the digital video segments. It gives the overall film a sense of naivety and craftiness, which aids in the impression of a low-budget but soulful narrative of a very serious issue. This last point is one I want to stress applies to every other element discussed. The Watermelon Woman is a testament to Dunye's determination, resourcefulness, and ingenuity. By turning limitations into strengths, the product achieves a stylistic and visual consistency that only careful planning and curation can achieve. Part invention, part necessity, The Watermelon Woman is the labor of love for Dunye's ancestors, descendants, and herself.